any of the speakers, because it should even be going out to these speakers as well. Yeah, I have people on the phone saying they can hear us perfectly. Okay, good, so that helps. All right, that's good. All right, we are gonna go ahead and get started, even though we're trying to make sure that we've got good audio going on here. It is July 7th, Wednesday, July 7th, about 11:10, and this is the meeting of the Assembly Public Safety Committee. And I'm Crystal Kennedy, co-chair with Cameron Perez-Verdia, and hopefully we will get everybody to be able to hear us here pretty clearly, but we're gonna also just talk loud, so bear with us. If you're not hearing us, kind of give us a signal so we can remind people to speak up. I'm assuming we've got the recording running. Mandy, are we being recorded then? Okay, Jenna, thank you. And could I get someone to call the roll for us, please?
Ms. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Here.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Mr. Constant? Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Ms. Zalatel? Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Weddleton?
Here.
Ms. Allard?
Here.
Ms. LaFrance?
Here.
Cheers.
Thank you. Do we have audio capability yet? You're still not hearing anything? Okay, all right. Well, we'll speak up. On the agenda, is there anything that the committee wants to see added to our agenda? We kind of have a typical agenda, but if there's anything that's particular that anybody wants added, now would be the time. Not hearing anything, but I will say that I would like to see us put under Section 4 for the AFD updates, just a question about AO 2021-63. So if there's no objection to just bringing that up, it'll just be a brief comment, a question about process on this one. Okay with that? All right, okay. Okay, then without any further ado, we're going to jump right into our APD regular updates. And we have with us, we have Mr. Constant with us for the record. So we have with us today Deputy Chief Curl as well as Captain Sean Case. So please join us.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you, and you have the floor, so go ahead.
Mr. Chair, we have two updates that we were asked about, body camera updates. Right now, we continue to receive input from citizens and other stakeholders that have an interest in the body cam policy. We have scheduled another meeting here on August 4th to, again, we'll continue to receive input from citizens, and we plan to update the current version of the policy we have after the August 4th meeting of the Public Safety Committee. We originally had intended to have the update ready for the August 18th Public Safety Advisory Committee meeting, but that was canceled they took July and August off for the summer. So we're still planning on one other public listening session, which we'll conduct in conjunction with the Public Safety Advisory Committee. It probably looks like maybe September for their next meeting. And by then, Captain Case will have updated the policy with the recommendations, or some of the recommendations that we can actually input into the policy that we've received from the general public and other stakeholders. Sean, anything else to say on that?
And what's the easiest way for the public to kind of chime in at this point, if they want to send comments?
They can go online to APD's website, and online there's a link where they can add comments to it.
Great, thanks. Any questions?
Mr. Rivera. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple questions. First is, so as I understand it, there have been a couple of versions of the policy already. We're like on version 2 or 3. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Do we have all of the different versions of the policy on the website for folks to see sort of where we started from and where we are now?
No, we just have the current draft version is on there.
Is there a rationale for not sort of putting all of those versions on the website for the public to be able to see?
Basically, through our portal where you can see our policies and procedures, you can only put the most current version of the policy.
Okay.
That's how we keep it updated with our other policies. This is actually with our policies and procedures. So we only, to make sure we maintain the most current version of them, the way the system was built, you can only have the most current version there.
Okay, well, I would suggest it might be beneficial to have all the different versions available somewhere on the website, just so we can get a sense of where things have changed and why things have changed. I guess this is for the co-chairs. When are we planning a review of this policy in committee?
Well, so I could just speak to the originally the Public Safety Advisory Committee had planned 2 public listening sessions in conjunction with the police department. Those were planned for August, so now that seems to have changed. The intent, at least that I was thinking, was that after those listening sessions, we would come back with the chief and others and review the public comments at that point, and then think about developing our own recommendations moving forward.
Okay, got it. So it sounds like
That's pushed out.
it's just been pushed a little bit. All right, fair enough. And then I'm just curious, has I guess Captain Case, you're taking the lead on developing the policy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so have you had a chance to meet with some groups, and particularly I'm interested if you've met with ACLU yet?
I've been part of one meeting with ACLU, and then I think they may have provided 2 different sets of comments. The latest I received this morning, so.
Okay, great, fantastic. Yeah, they also sent some of their comments to the assembly as well. It looks like they had some very specific suggestions. So would be very interested to hear your response to those at some point. Okay, those are all the questions I had. Thank you.
We have a few more folks in the queue. I would just jump in and add that one thing that we may consider, if there's not a possibility of the portal holding that we might think about the committee's website as a place to put those, and to potentially also put, if there are comments that are so submitted to us, that would be a place as well. So there's a one place that people can go and read the versions and also read any sort of comments that have been submitted that we want to make sure that we share. So that would be something that we can work with you on. So we have Mr. Wellington in the queue.
I have a couple of points in a question, but I think that actually makes 2 places for people to go, and we've got to make sure that we let them know. Also link it to the APD site for that really good chaos. So I was wondering, does 2 things on the physical body cams. There's different styles, and does the ultimate policy we end up with determine which style we want? And that's that question. Or have they already been ordered?
We haven't ordered the body cameras yet. We're still looking at the body camera we want to use. We know which company we want to go through, and after we go through the procurement, we'll make sure that everything is done above board, and we need to make sure it works with we have evidence.com, which gets the information to the district attorney and the prosecutor's office. We need to make sure that the footage from the body cameras can be extracted by us easily and forwarded to the different agencies that need the footage as well. So that will be part of the procurement process.
Okay, and there's somewhere on your chest,
It's usually
your GoPro. I mean, what's that?
The ones we looked at, it's just a little square that would mount. Here you go. There's a little loop right here you can see on my uniform. This is where it would be mounted.
All right, thanks.
Next we have Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you think that the target implementation date for the body cameras at the end of the year, beginning of next year, are we still on track for that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
Ms. Allard.
Thank you. So I know that we were just discussing about having different versions up. My concern is that someone's going to look at a prior version and think that's enforceable or that's law. So if we're going to have it up, all these different policies and versions, then we need to make it clear that maybe it has revised across it as a draft.
The way we have it on the website,
Yeah.
right across it says draft. So the final one won't be like that.
I don't think we need all the past versions up. I think it's a waste of taxpayer time and your time. But if that's what everybody on the committee decides, but I think one version, final version is fine with me. Thank you.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm thinking about, as we implement this body worn camera, I know that we have already dash cams, and I believe we have some, correct me if I'm wrong, we have some other kind of camera that, or recording device that folks take with them from the car, is that correct? And then how will this relate to that? Or is it going to completely replace it? And what are we going to do with any of that other old tech, or we plan to continue with that as we implement the body cams as well?
So, well, we have recording devices, tape recorders that officers carry with them. Also part of the dash camera, there is a microphone that is, you take it off and right now you clip it right here. And basically you go out there and it records audio when you are recording with your dash cam. Dash cameras will not go away. We are also looking to modernize those, and that will be part of the technology package that we're looking to upgrade as well. But the dash cam doesn't work, obviously, if you're not right in front of the car.
Yeah.
So the body cameras actually take over when you go into a house or when you're away from the frontal view of the car.
And the recording devices, audio recorders we're using now, will those go away?
Actually, yes, we're replacing those with our phones. So actually, our cameras and our audio recording devices we're using our phone for a lot of that. We have one of the apps we're using, the links right into evidence.com, so that it can all be uploaded and then downloaded easily and put into a good package.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have me in the queue and then Mr. Constant next. I wanted to go back to the timeline. The conversation we had with Chief McCoy was, I believe that implementation in first quarter of next year. Is that still correct? Or what is your anticipated timeline for having the policy finished and training finished and having them on the street?
We'll go with the first quarter of next year. I mean, later is always better, but if everything goes smooth, we could have it done by the end of this year. I mean, the acquisition of the body cameras and the training, we can actually acquire the body cameras. We can train the functionality of them prior to the use, and then we can just train on the policy after that. So then once they hit the ground and the policy's up, if the camera's already out there, we can start using them and they'll be good to go.
Mr. Compton.
Thank you. So there are tensions between the kind of ideal of one group, how they would be used, cameras, and how information will be released, and what the law allows, kind of procedures that are required. Can you give us kind of a high level description of the challenges that people are sorting through to try to figure out what the best policy is, so we can have kind of a foundation for a conversation about the details?
Through the chair, so some of the big issues are the right to privacy. When we want the camera turned on and off, obviously Alaskans like the right to privacy. We come into people's homes, we talk to victims, certain victims, we hold what they say a little bit more private during the nature of the crime. So that's one of the concerns. The other concern falls on how easily the public can have access to the video. And when we talk about access to the video, we got to look at criminal investigations that are pending, and then we also have to look at administrative investigations that are pending. One of the big challenges that we have as a community when we look at body-worn cameras and when we release this to the public is we think about police misconduct, we think about policy violations or complaints that come in, or officers involved in the use of deadly force or in custody deaths. And we want to see that video footage as quickly as possible. But at the same time, there's also the concern of having officers review that footage before they provide statements. That's a big balancing act, because we can't have officers providing statements under our current system, which is balancing the criminal portion and the administrative portion right away. That doesn't happen in 24 hours, doesn't happen in 48 hours. It generally is not going to happen in the first couple of weeks at least, if things are perfect and ideal. So if we want a body cam footage in any of those instances to be released in ACLU's recommendation is the first 5 days, We haven't even conducted our administrative investigation. If it's released in the public forum, now the officers have access to it. So now they're watching the video before they get interviewed, which is one of the concerns that we don't want to have happen. So that's going to be the interesting kind of discussion that we have in this forum and in the public forum moving forward, is how we play the balance between, again, the privacy right and open that video up to the public.
And can you speak to other communities and some examples of what they've done to balance that?
Yes, sir. So when you look at policies throughout the country, I will give you some caution that when you pull them, you have to understand that state law is different from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. There are a lot of state laws that are changing right now so that body-worn cameras can be more accessible to the public. We have some protections that we have in Alaska. We have the right to privacy that's in our Constitution. I don't think that's going away anytime in the near future. How that impacts the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure, is different and more strict here in Alaska than other parts of the country. And so, take California, for example, where they have state legislation that requires certain incidents to be posted in full within a short period of time. The way they handle criminal administrative investigations is also different in the state of California. So those things all have to come in play, and either later today or probably in the future, we'll continue to get more legal updates and information, which I'm not an attorney, so I'll stop short of that. That will explain that kind of in more depth.
Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, I have one, yes. Thank you. When Mr. about the audio recordings and you mentioned cell phones and the use of cell phones, I'm assuming there are policies about how cell phones are used currently, but how does that play into the policies for body cams and how things will be recorded with the body cams versus using the cell phones? Is there a connection there? Is that related or?
Well, there are a lot of connections. People are going to look at our policy and say, for instance, well, if they don't turn on, what's the punishment? Well, the punishment's covered in other parts of our policy if you violate the policy. The same thing with recordings. We have policies that deal with recordings and when you record. And again, we'll get into more depth on some of in the body camera policy as far as when you turn on, when you turn it off. But as far as the recording goes, I mean, we do cover those, and we have a lot of policies, I can tell you, because we update them all the time. But Sean, you want to deal with the?
Yeah, so we have the handheld recording devices. We also have our cell phone that are recording devices, and then body cams. We can't fully answer the question yet because we don't know when we're going to turn the body cams on yet and when we're not. So our handheld recording devices will probably for always exist because we're in an environment where we're not going to turn on our body cameras. We still want to collect that, with a digital recorder or a cell phone. So the body cam policy is going to be kind of modified and flexed once we get further down the road and we determine some of these other questions.
But cell phones are still going to be in that mix somewhere.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, well then let's move on. There's an item here that just says the navigation center and the evidence lot. And we did have some conversation about this yesterday in the Housing and Homelessness Committee meeting. So we might have had a lot of information that was given then and maybe questions answered, but because we had this on the agenda previously, I still want to make sure that if there's any questions about that, that we answer them down. Are you able to answer these questions?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So I actually spoke to Chief McCoy less than a week ago, and he gave us gave me a different estimate. And then I realized that he went out and got another estimate. And it's up $3 million, just over $3 million for this lot. And I see like how and who did he come up with so quickly on this estimate that the price jumped so dramatically.
So the estimate was done by my resource manager based on, he's got a long history of dealing with this. I mean, our current lot, we know what it costs for our current lot. It was done in stages. And he's taken a lot of where the proposed new site is going. It's larger. I mean, our current lot was built for 236 vehicles. We currently have over 500 vehicles in there. So I know with the administration, when they plan to move us, we're gonna go from a little over 3 acres to the area we're looking at is 5 acres. So just to pave that area, to put fencing around it, to have the security, the monitoring system. This was figured out by my resource manager. He's done this for a long time. He knows what the costs are because he deals with all our construction projects and he's dealt with them for, gosh, at least 15 years at APD. So those are just his estimates. He didn't go out and get with a paving company and say, how much would it cost to prepare this site? This is just based on his personal knowledge.
Chair, can you do it? Oh, please. So for the record, to be clear, that Chief wasn't far off on his general estimate, but we're actually doubling the size. Is that what we're doing, or is it more than
Not
doubling?
quite doubling, but it's actually going to be a larger size.
Appropriately for the 500 vehicles or whatever may come in,
Yes.
because we were squishing them with.
They're squished, and we're actually working with the district attorney's office to try to get some of the evidence vehicles that have been there for 10 to 20 years to get them.
Okay, so we're going bigger, and so the price is different. So it's not that it's just same size and everything. That clears up a lot for me. Thank you.
Ms. LaFrance?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the estimate that was shared with us yesterday with the $4 million and the note at the bottom that says, assuming following all MOA contracting rules, construction could begin in spring 2022. Can you say a little bit more about the schedule? I'm assuming that if it were to begin before that time, then the cost would go up. If it would be possible to do some of this, winter construction work or fall, or would you just comment on the schedule and any flexibility with it?
But I'm not sure, you have to go through the bidding process, you have to go through the permitting process. When my resource manager did that, he figures this is going to take a while to get all the bids out there, to get all the permits. So this is just his estimate based on, I can tell you, the upgrades of the Elmore facility still haven't started yet. We've been working on that for several years. So this is just his best guess about how long the process would actually take. I mean, if there was an emergency declared and we can do things more rapidly, then that would be great. But again, this is just his estimate. This isn't going through planning and zoning. This was done in an afternoon, just based off his expertise.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so if construction isn't going to begin till 2022, where are we putting these 500 cars in the interim? We know?
I do not know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Constant?
Just, can't let this one go. 10 to 20 years, cars are on that lot.
Yeah.
Really? So is this something that we contemplate, they go into forfeited property or, how does that work? Because that's kind of wild.
It's part of the criminal defense. We have to keep, they're all evidence vehicle. Every vehicle in there is an evidence vehicle. So it's just the rules of evidence that they're required to be kept there. And like I said, we're working with the district attorney's office. There's an interpretation on their part, interpretation on our part. We go by their part because they're the experts. So when they tell us we can release them, we release them.
And I'll just add, I guess, just to expand on the definition of the evidence lot versus an impound lot. Those are two different things.
We do not have an impound.
It is not an impound lot. This is evidence for various cases and trials and, yeah.
That's correct.
Thank you. Anything else? I guess I do have a question, just in regard to kind of the process by which you have to maintain the chain of custody when you move these vehicles. Can you tell me a little bit about what that entails whether that's a sworn officer duty in terms of trying to move these vehicles with that kind of chain of custody? Can you speak to that a bit, how that happens? when the actual moving of those vehicles?
We actually have our impound technicians, or they can actually follow vehicles. They keep copious notes, say we moved this vehicle from indoor secure to the outdoor secure lot. And again, that's right across the street. It's not a long distance, but somebody has to maintain visual contact with the vehicle to, if it comes down the line, to testify, yes, this vehicle was not tampered with by anyone. So it's, we can't just let someone go in the lot and take the vehicles and say, oh, I can see you later, because there still could be potential evidence inside the vehicle or on the outside of the vehicle.
So there's essentially a person of some sort that is from APD that is keeping their eyes on that and following or tracking that vehicle the whole way wherever it's going.
Yes.
It's
And if
gotta
there's,
have somebody escorting it.
yes.
Okay.
And if there's anyone inside the lot, they're escorted as well. No one's allowed in there by themselves.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Allard?
Thank you. So like Ms. LaFrance, I pulled up, thank you, Madam Chair, the reallocation budget for all the impound cars. Can you explain a little bit about the 1% art? I'm thinking, I know what it is, but I bet we can get a bunch of high schoolers to participate. But can you talk to me about the 1% art fee? Okay, it says 1% art, $39,625 that's estimated.
Maybe there's a rule in the city that says when you do new construction, that part of it has to go for art. That's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. This is, thank you.
It's state and local, I believe, yeah. Thank you. Anything else? All right,
No, I would add one thing. I had requested that at some point we'd be able to tour the facility so that we could have a sense of the physical plan, what investments have been made, fencing, security cameras, et cetera. I believe we were told that's just really not feasible from the perspective of evidence and security and everything else. So I'm wondering if somebody in the department could create a video document of some of the key infrastructure on site so we can have a visual representation of what we are talking about when we're talking about an evidence lot, right? Because it's very abstract to us when we hear about a 3-acre flat lot needing $4 million of investment. But having some way to understand visually what that means, it might be really helpful to some of us as we contemplate what process we have to move forward.
Actually, anytime anyone wants to go view the lot, just contact me and I will escort you over there and I will show you the lot and I will show you the proposed new lot as well.
Okay.
As like I said, as long as you're with somebody and you're not in there, we don't let you go in there and touch the vehicles and get inside them. As long as you're being escorted, there's no problem whatsoever.
Okay, I will take you up on that. Thank you.
Mr. Weddleton?
So where's this new lot?
It's where part of our old lot was, right over by the bus barn. I believe there was a plan to put a health center over there, off Tudor Road. It's Tudor and Elmore just to the west.
Just across.
You know where the motorcycle training site is? So it's the motorcycle training site, the vacant field, and then there is actually a fenced lot there already.
So where's the motorcycle training?
They rent from us, they rent from the city, so I'm not sure where they would go.
So I can answer that briefly.
Okay, Mr. Constant?
HLB has been working with them to secure use of some part of the Old Native Hospital site as it's waiting to be temporarily transformed. And so there are options that they have on the table.
Thank you. Well, seeing no other questions, then thank you very much, Deputy Chief. Thank you, Captain. So we're gonna,
I said they're excited to go.
oh yeah. So next on the hook, no, I don't. Up next is our Anchorage Fire Department, and we want to welcome our new fire chief, Doug Schrage. So Chief, come join us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
I guess this is the hot seat.
It is sort of. So we just wanted to give our new fire chief an opportunity to kind of really introduce himself. And of course, I think you're already scheduled for an actual work session for the confirmation hearing. But anyway, without putting you in too much of a hot seat, yeah, we would just love to have you just introduce yourself and tell us anything you'd like to about your new position here and kind of where you came from. And then if there's any questions, we can ask them here or we can save them for the confirmation hearing. But anyway, you are up, so welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm absolutely delighted to have been selected to be Anchorage's next fire chief. I worked for 26 years for the Anchorage Fire Department. I was first hired in 1985, and I was laid off, curiously, in 1989, when there was a series of cutbacks in the city government. I was rehired the same year, and I left the department in 2010 as the Deputy Chief of Operations, the Chief Operating Officer. And so to be back in the department where I worked so many years with many of the same people that I've known for decades is undescribable. I'm very, very happy to be here. I'm honored to serve, and it is my sincere interest to meet your expectations and provide high quality services to our community, the level of service and customer service and professional care that our customers, our citizens and visitors have come to expect from us, and to do it in a way that's transparent and in a highly ethical manner and open and participative, and all of those things.
Thank you so much. Oh, we have lots of questions. Okay, Mr. Weddleton.
But I just wonder, maybe it's better for the Friday meeting, but can we just throw some issues out there? This, hey, you got this new job, here's some things.
If it is public safety oriented, Mr. Weddleton, I think you are free to do so.
Okay, somewhat, and we had an email exchange on wildfire, but we have seen comments on that, what your experiences in wildfire prevention, so on. And then we have another issue that, we're the city's a conglomeration of service areas, and one is EMT, which everyone in the city pays taxes for EMT, for every property taxpayer. But then we also have the fire service area, which is smaller than the entire city. Are you aware of these issues here?
I am, yes.
Okay, so as we become less fire and more EMTs, the people who are outside the fire service area get a great deal, because most of the funding for the fire department is for the fire service area and not EMT, but most of your costs are really EMT now. So I know Jody and others were working on a system to get that back in balance. And it's complicated, but be aware. I guess that's not a question, it's just, that's been something we're tracking.
I appreciate knowing that. I'm aware that the fire service areas, there are 3 fire service areas, Anchorage, of course, Chugat and Girdwood, which are not entirely congruent with the EMS service area. So everybody within the municipality pays for EMS services, and people within those fire service areas pay for their corresponding fire service. I can tell you that this was finding the right balance between how much of an offset the EMS service area would provide to the fire department over the years has been an issue that has gone on for many years. And I think it's also a moving target as our mission changes and the focus of our mission changes. Thank you for that observation.
I have no answer for you. Wait, it's a challenge.
But I'm told that there's some work in progress. I haven't yet been briefed on what it is.
Thank you. Mr. Constable, I
Thank
think
you.
you had your hand up.
Yes, 2 things. First, I'll just make a disclosure that most of you have probably heard, but my niece is married to the fire chief's son. And so we are not directly related, nor do we have any personal financial dealings, for the record. But yes, we have a good social and familial connection. I do have a question, and this is a question for an answer at a future time. We don't need to try to answer it now. We had a proposal brought before us yesterday, at least in draft form, to eliminate a very important program. And I'm actually okay with us conceiving of eliminating the program, and that's the beetle kill mitigation program that we created through the CARES Act. I'm not saying I'm okay with eliminating the program, I'm okay with considering eliminating the program, evaluating whether it's the right thing to do. What I'm hoping your team can provide to us is a detailed kind of prioritization map of the areas that are most at risk in the urban wildland interface on public lands, so that we can evaluate, if we don't agree that all of those funds should go away, but some of them can, which areas we would prioritize to ensure we don't have a rapid loss of houses based on fuel that we have loaded onto our public lands near those homes. So I'm hoping you can get your team to come up with that kind of a graduated list, and probably do that in partnership with the parks, because they've been doing some of this work as well.
Thank you. We do have a contractor that's working on managing that effort. I'll get the information you suggested, and I'll get it to you shortly.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Dunbar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Mr. Bronson during the campaign stated that every department except for the police department was going to have a 5 to 8% budget cut. And so this again, like Chris said, if you don't have the answer today, this is fine. And we'll have a budget meeting next week about that too. But I'm wondering, have you been asked to start the process of considering a 5 to 8% budget cut in the fire department? And what does a 5 to 8% budget cut department look like at AFD? Are you able to give any insight on that today?
I can, thank you for the question. I can tell you that I've not been asked to consider a cut as of yet. I've only been on the job for 3 days. That may be forthcoming. But no, I have not been asked that. From what I've come to learn about our budget and what I know is that 5 to 8% cut would be very significant. Given that, like many service-oriented agencies of the city, a very large component of our operating costs are personnel costs. So we require people to staff our ambulances and fire engines and fire inspection functions. And to take a cut of really any magnitude would challenge our ability to keep those functions going at the current level.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Yeah, I was kind of questioning whether you were already looking at where you could cut. But I think that one thing that we need to understand too about the new administration, that although a campaign says one thing, when you get in the books and you see things differently, it could be a little less. But I'm kind of a fiscal conservative, so I think everybody can cut somewhere straight across the board. And I believe that maybe the administration would be able to give those departments free rein to cut where they feel they're needed, but still be able to cut. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Constant?
Yeah, so conversations about cutting the fire department are always interesting, because we do have to staff the rigs that we have. And so there's a balancing act. Where in the budget do we get hit if we don't have enough hired individuals in the department?
If I understand your question, the question is if I had to take a significant budget cut, which personnel would be affected?
No, that's not quite the question. The reality is we have to provide the service, right? And so what ends up happening if you don't have enough human power?
Well, when you don't have enough people to do it, then you rely on the people that you do have to maintain a same level of service, which results in overtime.
Right, that's exactly what happens. And so it's a very interesting balancing act between the interests. If you cut too deep, you end up spending more, which is kind of an oddity of certain elements within our municipality. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. So, and Mr. Thompson's correct, and it would go into overtime. One thing that I would like to see, and I'll just bring it up as an example, and they explained it, still wasn't completely on board with it, but the APD last year spent $600 per coffee pot. They felt that the longevity of it would outweigh the cost, meaning that maybe the last 3 years, you could still buy a $35 coffee pot for each floor, maybe even 2. So my question would be, maybe there would be areas in there, procurement, and maybe those are necessities. Maybe we don't need 15 microwaves or other things, so we could actually cut there as well. I mean, you've been with the department 26 years. Do you see things where you could cut in regard to some of the, which is probably a miss now, but Pcard purchases?
I don't believe, thank you for that question. I don't believe I can yet speak to Pcard purchases. I will agree with you that there are certainly areas where, I don't know what they are yet, but I know that there are efficiencies that can be found, and there's probably some overspending that occurs in any large agency. I did assure Mr. Bronson that I would be on the lookout for those things. I also pledged to him to take a very deep dive into the causes of our overtime, and that we would do our best to manage it, perhaps more aggressively than it's been managed in the past. I don't know that it's been undermanaged or mismanaged. I just think that that's an area where we can reduce some of our expenses with the existing personnel that we have.
Can you do a follow-up, Jen? Sure. So I do know that last year there were some questions about the maintenance and some of the delays with individuals that were not there, but their slots, certain wages and pays, and delay in hiring up to 6 years to get the proper people in. And I think that maybe those are areas that we could look at. I could get that audit for you.
I'm sorry, did you say dispatch?
Maintenance. And I could get that audit for you for your review.
That would be helpful. I'm not familiar with that.
Seeing no other questions at this time, I will comment that Chugach Eagle River still would like to have a ladder truck back. Anyway, just saying.
Madam Chair,
Ms. LaFrance.
thank you. And I just wanted to mention that as one of the representatives of District 6, which includes the Hillside and Girdwood, I get very concerned when we start talking about cutting the fire department in any branch of public safety. So I think that definitely we all need to continue to take audit results very seriously and look for whatever ways that we can be efficient. But I do not want to see a period of time where we don't have fire academies, which are expensive but needed, because I think that we risk making short-term gains at long-term expense and at the cost of the public safety. So I just wanted to mention that, because when we talk about cutting, we need to be very careful and mindful of the big picture. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Oh, Mr. Constant.
I just think we could free up a half an hour for Friday.
Okay, great. But so.
Yeah, so I guess as you close your comments today, I guess one of the things that I'd like to hear, and if you're not ready just to say them today, you can do them at the next confirmation. But I'd really like to hear a little bit about your priorities, about knowing that you are new and knowing that there's still time to be able to develop that. But I'd like to have a sense from you about what your focus is going to be over the first 90 days. And if we can expect changes, if we can expect things to be different from what we've seen over the last few years. So to the degree that we can be aware that you have a different philosophy, a different leadership style, a different approach than what we've seen, that would be helpful for us to know. So anything that you can share with us about sort of what your focus, what your priorities, what your start is going to look like, I think would be helpful for us.
Thank you very much for that question. Well, I have a vision for the fire department, which is basically the same as the vision that I had for the operations division when I was the deputy chief. And that is where the fire department provides over-the-top customer service with excellence in their delivery of care, being masters of their craft, and so forth. I'm not saying that they aren't that now. I'm still formulating my priorities, but I have come to appreciate that there's some work within the organization to be done. I think that through a sequence of reorganizations that have occurred in the last 10 or 11 years, there's an absence of vertical alignment from the firefighters, medics, inspectors, and other people in the street all the way up to the fire chief. And I think that vertical alignment and the continuity of command from top to bottom and bottom to top is broken in a few places. And it's resulted in things like overspending at the station level. I don't know the particulars of that, but this is the impression I'm forming, and it's an area where I think I can help. My strengths include team building and being able to get a group of diverse interests to coalesce around a common vision. And I think that's what I bring to this fire department. And so that's where I'm going to focus my efforts. And I've already mentioned that I'm very interested in more closely managing the administration of overtime. I have the sense, unsubstantiated at this point, but I have the sense that our overtime could be better managed, and that we are spending more than we need to. And I think that's an area of focus. So those are the two things that are sort of in my 30 to 90 day plan. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I think that spurred another question. Mr. Constant.
Yeah, a little on aspiration. So, through Dr. Levy's management, medical officer, Anchorage Fire Department finds itself in a constant competition with Seattle for who can provide the best cardiac response in America. So we're like the leading edge, and we're always fighting to be the number one, which is great. I appreciate that kind of competition. Are there other areas in the department that we could be imagining to kind of improve upon, that we can become leading in the country for, that you can think of?
Well, the issue that you, thank you, the issue that you raised, discharge from hospital cardiac arrest survival rate, is a key indicator of performance in a lot of areas. And so as we improve our ability to treat victims of sudden cardiac arrest events, it also improves our ability to respond to other needs as well. I can't say that I've identified any particular areas. I am interested in bringing the public more into improving our cardiac arrest survival rate. I met with Dr. Levy yesterday. I have experience with bringing, in the community where I worked for the last 10 years, I have experience with bringing a program which basically in the background through the 911 center connects people who are in cardiac arrest with nearby citizen responders who know CPR. Because right now, and it happens every day of the year where people go into cardiac arrest and need someone to perform CPR. And there are people nearby that can provide it, but they don't know. There's no way to connect them. So, I've been giving a lot of thought about our special teams, backcountry rescue, water rescue, structural collapse rescue. I've been thinking a lot about how we might improve our deployment of assets, our fire trucks and ambulances around the city to provide the best coverage. Ms. LaFrance, your question about providing continual 24/7 coverage on the hillside it's a great observation, and it's something that I'm interested in continuing to provide, however we do that. So the basic answer is no, not really. I'm basically focused on 80% of our work is ambulance work, EMS work, and it's provided not just by the persons assigned to the ambulances, of course, but through a tiered response, which includes the nearest capable responders, no matter what piece of equipment they're serving on a given day. Thank you.
So thank you, Chief Schrage. We appreciate, I think you are going to get round 2 now of a confirmation hearing on Friday. So wasn't sure that this would go into that much detail, but I can understand that. So everybody's excited to get to know who you are and what happens with the leadership in our fire department. So appreciate all your time here. But I do have one kind of question for you for something that's before the assembly on Tuesday. And that is AO 2020-163, which has to do with revisions to the ambulance code registration and fees. And there's quite a bit to that ordinance in terms of changes. And so the question kind of for us is, do we want to have that full work session on it, which would potentially delay us actually being able to address it at the assembly meeting? And if we were to do that and delay that, is that a problem for AFD to delay this particular ordinance, its revisions?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. I'm just coming up to speed with it. I don't know what the effective date proposed is.
Okay. And that makes sense, I understand that, but Mr. Weddleton, you had your hand up. Do you want to talk a little bit about this idea about whether or not we need a work session on this one?
Yeah, I don't know, I had, when we first saw it introduced, I sent it out emailed it to ambulance companies. I'm not sure it really affects AFD, you do what you do, but, and sent it to them and asked for comments, and I got a couple, I got a call and email back, said, okay, we'll look at it. Nothing more, so I don't know, I have no follow-up again today and tomorrow with them, see, but to some extent, I think they're like, okay, whatever, is my sense at this point. So I don't want to have a big work session for something that's not really an issue, but I guess just personally, I'll follow up on it. Does anyone else got comments?
Chair LaFrance, do you want to chime in on about whether or not that was a good idea, you wanted to do that, or heard anything else from any members about this one?
I have not heard, thank you, Madam Chair. I've not heard anything from other members concerning a request for a work session, and was hoping to get that feedback today. Though I realize some members haven't had a chance, to review it. I guess the big question, as you mentioned, is what is the impact of delaying it?
Okay. Well, how about if you get any feedback from some of your other staff that this would be a problem if we delayed, and then let Assembly Chair LaFrance know about that. But otherwise, is there a sense that we need to have a work session? Because we can certainly request that here and now if that's the will of this committee. Mr. Weddleton's kind of saying no, Mr. Constant's saying no, but Mr. Weddleton, do you want to
Well,
comment?
I think my sense at this point, we'll have the public hearing, and if people do come ahead with issues, then we can decide then. But at this point, I went fishing for trouble and didn't find it.
Thank you. Mr. Constant, did you have a comment too?
Yeah, I agree with the perspective, and it's not related to our ambulance service, right? It's private ambulance services in the municipality. And so I don't know, I haven't heard any concerns from any of the operators, but I think if we heard from them that there were problems, we might want to consider it. But at this point, like Mr. Weldon says, I haven't heard a darn thing about it except from this body. And so to me, I think we run through the process as we have.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, well, we will go with that, but certainly if you end up thinking that there's some issues or something, I'm sure Ms. LaFrance would be happy to hear about that from AFD's perspective. So anyway. Well, again, welcome, thank you, and hopefully we won't grill you quite as thoroughly on Friday, but we will see you then.
I look forward to it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. All right, last thing on our agenda really is the law update, and we were going to talk a little bit with the legal implications to the body cam policies. And who do we have with us from the law department?
Hello, I'm Erin Bradley. I'm the Deputy City Prosecutor. I'm filling in for Sarah Stanley.
Thank you, Ms. Bradley. Welcome. Hello. Hi.
If you could introduce yourself just one more time.
Hello, I'm Erin Bradley. I'm the Deputy City Prosecutor. I'm filling in for Sarah Stanley today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So yes, so what do you have for us from the legal department in regard to this process of getting a body cam policy in place?
Well, we are working with ATD to make sure that the evidence gets collected. I know that it's going to be a more lengthy process because of the new video that's going to be added. And we haven't worked out all of the details. It may involve some extra cost in terms of the time that it takes our office to process the evidence. Some of that cost is going to be passed on to the defense when they pick up the discovery, keeping in mind that the vast majority of our defendants receive court-appointed counsel because they are indigent. So I don't have any specific information, but we're trying to work with APD to make sure that this happens as efficiently as possible.
Thank you. And I think when we had this initial conversation with Ms. Stanley, she mentioned the potential for other employees, for additional staff.
Yeah,
So did you have?
Oh, excuse me. Right now, we do have a couple of open positions. One of those is a clerk in the domestic violence unit. We also, because of the alcohol tax, we were awarded another prosecutor position in the DV unit. We recently lost our motions and appeals attorney. She left us to go work for the state. So we have that position open. There is a hiring freeze right now. So we are working with the new administration to see which positions we are going to be able to fill. And we've had some conversations with our new city attorney, Patrick Burke. He's a prior prosecutor and he understands our needs, he understands our job, and he's receptive to working with us.
Thank you. I think we have a question for you from Mr. Weddleton.
I guess just an order of magnitude on the increased costs due to body cams.
The exact number, I don't have a number to give you right now, but I can get one for you, or we can try to approximate one and have one for you at the next meeting.
Well, I guess it probably, it would be hire one extra person, and then we're talking 150,000, or is it way more than that, like 100,000?
We would be hoping to manage this extra duty with the people that we have. If not, then we would work with the new administration to hopefully fund another position. We do have the additional administrative position that it has been put on the books for us in the DV unit, but we're waiting to see which positions we're going to be able to fill because of the hiring freeze. Fortunately, with the attrition in our office, we've had empty attorney slots for the last 2 years, the time that I've been in this position. So hopefully that will give us a cushion of some funds to use.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question, if you don't have the information today, perhaps the next time we meet, Sarah or someone else could. The footage from the body cams is going to be this new source of evidence for prosecutions available to both the defense and to the prosecutors. Is the experience in other cities that additional evidence tends to accelerate settlements or increase the number of settlements pre-trial, or decrease the number of settlements pre-trial, or does it tend to be neutral?
The only other time that I've worked with body cam evidence was when I was working at the U.S. Attorney's office. I had our SALSA, or Special Assistant U.S. Attorney position in that office for 8 years. Body cam evidence was very useful in identifying participants in crimes. It was very useful in proving that they were actively engaged in, for example, selling controlled substances. It usually resulted in a solid case with a relatively quick settlement. Having said that, there were some circumstances where the body cam was a little bit faulty. I would get lots of images of floors and ceilings when I wanted images of people. Only time will tell how it's going to play out with our cases.
But certainly, so I mean, the U.S. Attorney's Office tends to do higher level felonies than our city. Although if you were a SALSA, I guess those do like on minor cases on military bases too. That's my own experience with that program.
Right.
But so but many other cities have gone through this. Are we aware of any kind of data from the other cities?
I am not aware of data from other cities. I can ask Ms. Stanley to provide me with that information when she comes back the next time this committee meets.
Yeah, and again, I didn't expect you to have it off the top of your head, but it is interesting. I mean, perhaps that will be a net cost saver if we can get a lot of cases to settle quicker.
I am hopeful. I can tell you with felony practices, the prosecutors tend to have lower caseloads. When I was a felony prosecutor at the DA's office and at the U.S. Attorney's office, I had a caseload of about 35 cases. Our prosecutors with our misdemeanor caseload for the city carry a caseload of anywhere from 250 to 350 cases.
Right, which is outrageous and unacceptable.
It's very high.
So it might not be a cost saver, but it could be a sort of quality of life and quality of prosecution improver if we could reduce those caseloads.
If we can get stronger cases where defense attorneys are going to go to their clients with evidence, really establishing and locking down guilt, that is going to hopefully enable us to get faster settlements. We are running into some issues now with the results of the pandemic. We've got a couple thousand cases in district court in the pretrial status. Anywhere from 450 to 500 cases are pending trial. Because of the pandemic, these cases have not gotten better with age. We've lost contact with some witnesses and we're having to re-subpoena them. And defense attorneys have likewise lost contact with their clients, which is unfortunately leaving us with a pattern of cases remaining in a holding pattern. We've been doing change of plea hearings throughout the course of the pandemic. So cases can settle. It's just a matter of getting the defendants there in court to handle their case and having our witnesses available so that the defense attorneys know we can prove the cases at trial. One issue we're having right now, the court has only been making 2 judges available for jury trials each week. This afternoon, we have trial call status hearings in 80 cases that could potentially go to trial next week. At most, we're going to be able to do 2 trials. And we resumed trials at the end of May. So for a long period of time, we were deprived of the ability to prove a case at trial, which really created some backlog for us. But I'm encouraged in the conversations that we've had with Patrick Burke and his experience as prosecutor that we can work through this as best we can.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions in regard to body cam policy updates? And actually, I just want to leave it open to you if there was anything else from the Department of Law that you wanted us to be updated on.
No, I don't have anything else, but our phone number is 343-4250. Call anytime if you have questions. And thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
Thank you.
Okay, one thing that I just want to put at the bottom of our list here was the idea about our next meeting. Typically, we meet the first Wednesday of every month, and next month that will coincide with the report and meeting. I think it's a virtual meeting with the Anchorage Economic Development Corporation. And typically, members of this body attend that meeting. It's always good information about what's going on in our community economic-wise. So anyway, the thought is that we would change our meeting, and we haven't set any date yet, but kind of want to just make sure that you are aware that we will be looking for another date so that people can attend that AEDC luncheon. So anyway, so we will check on that. We'll work with all 3 departments, the Department of Law, the Anchorage Fire Department, and the Anchorage Police Department, and see what works for all of us. But hopefully we can just move it to the following day. So we'll work on that. So just be aware. Audience participation, we have time. We're at 12:15, and Mr. Haberman, please join us. You have 3 minutes. And we know you will time yourself.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I follow the public process. When the public process is done appropriately, a decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. First thing I would like to know, and I'm glad the members of the police department are still here for this meeting, is that when there was a reference to a public opportunity to address this situation on cam cameras, I'd like to point this serious flaw. Now, as public notices, assembly meetings, boards and commissions and so forth in different departments, they require to have a consistent public notice out for the people. You'll see at the Muni site. Unfortunately, the police department as one department finds it separate from that policy and how they handle those notices. So what happened with the notice of bringing the people in the discussion on the camera scenario is result is they went a different route. It wasn't put on the Muni site. It was put on the police department site, and they used Twitter or whatever, but away from encouraging public participation. They were a separate department. They're a department, yes, for the Municipality of Anchorage, but they are not supposed to be different from all the other departments in how those public notices happen. So the end result of that scenario was very few people were able to participate. I'd like to compliment Member Rivera for his note about the different versions of policies that were coming out for this draft. Yes, I agree. Those drafts should be out there. I'm concerned that Member Allard says we should only have one version. But I'd like to remind you, as assembly members, assembly meetings, you know to have a lot of versions. And you all put those versions out for the public to see. So why is that different? You're different from the police department and vice versa. So also I'll close with this scenario. On June 22nd, I was in a major crash. And I witnessed the scenario of the police department and how they handled the scenario. Now at the hospital, I was visited by an APD officer. He handed me a card. His signature was there, but I asked for it to be printed. And the officer refused to print the full name. Print part of the name, but not the full. And then also when I visited the police department front counter on Friday, the party I spoke to, I says, can I have your name? And it says, can I have your full name? And they said, are we allowed to do that? Where is the transparency for us to know and have quality control in who's saying what, who's doing what? It's not happening at the APD. And I'm concerned there. Also, the concern is when my vehicle was removed without my authorization, it was closing because my 3 minutes is just about up. I found that it was quite difficult for me to find it. The APD doesn't really have records exactly where those vehicles are signed. They don't maintain them. And I had to call a towing company and finally, but also most important thing in this thing, I asked the assistance of the police department to put a covering over that car so like papers, legal papers, were not affected. They did not cooperate. I pleaded with the towing company and they assisted and they complied with that. But when they contacted the towing company, they came back and says, no, we can't do that. What are we doing here? Is this respectful? Is this responsible? And my time is up and thank you and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Mr. Haberman. Anyone else for audience participation? Public comments? And Mandy, just to be clear, we have people that can still call in on the phone. Do we have anyone that's online with us? Okay, all right. Just want to make sure I'm covering everything. Ms. Allard?
Thank you. So I actually want to say something that happened Saturday night about 1 a.m. in the morning in regards to APD. So my husband was coming back from Kenai fishing, which we all call a suicide run. And he had a diabetic low. He wrecked on the sewer. So when I got the phone call from APD, I was upset. And they had to pull him out of the vehicle. They couldn't render any type of medication or anything because it's against policy. I understand and I respect that. So as he was laying down on the ground, passed out, the ambulance came from Garfield, which I appreciate. And APD calmed his wife down and took my husband's vehicle. I was frazzled, didn't know what to do. They recommended where and who. They called, dispatch called themselves for me. Had my husband's vehicle towed, had it impounded. He then picked up the vehicle on Sunday. And what I want to say is that for me, your process has been wonderful. And that is a real world experience that I experienced personally. And I'm grateful for what you guys do. I hadn't seen that type of professionalism in a very long time, not from police, but just the way they handled me in that situation. So I do know who the two officers were that I would say saved my husband's life, and I will reach out to them. But I just want to say thank you for what you guys do. Nobody's perfect, and I know that. But what you guys did for my husband and my family on Saturday night was perfect. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. All right, if there are no other member comments, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Yeah, I was scared. He doesn't know. He took his medicine.